Great Coasters International, otherwise known as GCI, has become one of, if not the best wooden coaster manufacturer on the planet. Their new style began a new era for the wooden coaster industry. One of their first ever coasters would be Gwazi, the first ever dueling wooden coaster. While the coaster acted as a prototype for what GCI had to offer for future editions, the picturesque structure and intense layout would draw riders from across the country. However, due to the infamous Florida weather, the ride would suffer major downtime and later lead towards its closure.
What once was the premier dueling coaster that introduced a new era to the amusement industry, it is now a single-sided RMC conversion that basically replaced the old wooden coasters. So why did it close? Let's dive in to discover the story behind Gwazi.
PTC has been the king of wooden coasters since the early 1900s. They have built over 100 wooden coasters throughout the past century. Throughout that 100-year process, they continued to develop new designs, new trains, and most of all, new technology. Due to all of their success, many years later, other companies would join in on the action.
In the late 80s and the early 90s, 3 new coaster manufacturers would try their best to rival what PTC has been doing throughout the past 70 years. Charles Din would start his own company known as the Din Corporation. His first coaster would be the Wolverine Wildcat at Michigan's Adventure, which still operates to this day. Unfortunately, the Din Corporation wouldn't get as far as the company will only build 11 coasters in a 3-year span. Only a select few still operate to this day. This company is most well known for Hercules at Dorney Park, Predator at Six Flags Darien Lake, and of course the infamous Mean Streak at Cedar Point.
In 1992, Custom Coasters International, otherwise known as CCI, would enter the amusement industry with Kingdom Coaster at Dutch Wonderland. CCI would introduce a new kind of wooden coaster. Their track design would allow the coaster to twist and turn at higher speeds instead of sticking with the classic out and back layout. While the company would get far in the amusement industry, there was one more manufacturer that decided to join in on the wooden coaster revolution. In 1994, Great Coasters International, otherwise known as GCI, would be created. The company would get to work on creating a new type of roller coaster. In 1996, they would open Wildcat at Hershey Park, the first ever GCI roller coaster. Using trains from the Philadelphia Toboggan Company, the company would create what they called a twister layout, which would allow the coaster to go through twists, turns, and airtime hills much faster than other wooden coasters can. This would be a revolutionary design, as the company would create more and more coasters throughout the next couple of years.
In 1998, GCI would build Roar at Six Flags America and Roar at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. These 2 new wooden coasters would show that GCI isn't messing around and could top any other wooden coaster in the industry. However, they didn't stop. When CCI built the Twisted Twins at what was Six Flags Kentucky Kingdom, GCI decided that they needed to up the ante with a bigger and badder dually wooden coaster, and in 1999, GCI would do the impossible.
The racing coaster concept has always been a highlight of any park, especially with coasters like Racer at Kennywood, Rebel Yell, aka Racer 75 at King's Dominion, and the Racer at Kings Island. These 3 wooden coasters were revolutionary at the time of opening. However, their layouts are very simple. A few hills, some large turnarounds, and some small bunny hills until you hit the brakes. Some parks may take this type of coaster to a higher standard, like Colossus at Six Flags Magic Mountain, American Eagle at Six Flags Great America, or Gemini at Cedar Point. As I said before, all of these layouts were very simple, and some even identical to the other wooden coasters. The idea of a dueling coaster was a very new concept. The difference between a racing coaster and a dueling coaster is that a racing coaster usually shares the same support structure and has an either exact or mirrored layout as its twin, while a dueling coaster usually uses two different support structures that interlock with each other at different times, and may have two separate but similar layouts. The only dueling coasters that were made were coasters like Cop Car Chase at Movie Park Germany and the new Dueling Dragons at Islands of Adventure. So at this time, there was no such thing as a dueling wooden coaster. Great Coasters International wanted to make an original and unique coaster that no one has seen before. And especially after Twisted Twins is opened at Kentucky Kingdom, GCI needed to one-up them. All they needed was a buyer. Busch Gardens was the first to step up to the plate and buy the new prototype from GCI.
On June 18, 1999, Great Coasters International's newest wooden roller coaster, Gwazi, would open to the public at Busch Gardens Tampa in Tampa, Florida. The new coaster would become an icon in the park and become the park's newest standout attraction for guests to experience. The ride would consist of two different sides, the lion side and the tiger side. Both of the sides would mirror each other, as the tiger side took a left turn out of the station and the lion side would take a right turn out of the station to head into their lift hills. One of the most iconic parts of Gwazi that people remembered when the attraction was dueling is that the trains would come face to face and drop 91 feet, what seems to be head on towards the other riders. Both trains immediately head up into Ejector Hill in a large upward bank turn. The lion side would take a turn that would go under the tiger's lift hill, and the tiger side takes a turn that goes to the right. The riders on both sides drop down, hit an ejector hill, and both turn right into another turnaround. This leads the trains through both identical turnarounds and lifter-filled hills, and make turnarounds into the only sections which make both of these sides unique. After the turnaround, the tiger side drops and heads into a snappy ejector-filled S-bend element, and the lion side heads up into an upward banked right turn. The coaster will then pop into 3 back-to-back floater hills, and then both sides make a 360-degree helix going in opposite directions that leads both of them into the brake run.
Gwazi would continue to operate at Busch Gardens Tampa, however, there was one problem. Florida is a very humid state, especially with Tampa being so close to the Gulf of Mexico. The air can be very damp throughout large periods of time, and that can be throughout days, weeks, and even months. Plus, with Florida being a highly prone state to hurricanes, the coasters would suffer through wood rot and sometimes even flooding. Throughout the late 2000s, Gwazi would become a rough coaster that just made people want to avoid it at all costs. To fix this problem, GCI would place their new and custom designed Millennium Flyer trains on Gwazi to hopefully ensure a smoother experience for the coaster. After 1 year switching to Millennium Flyers, Busch Gardens Tampa would choose not to run the tiger side of this coaster in 2012. Not just due to roughness and low ridership, but due to wood rot and a failing structure, leaving the lion side running alone. But just like Dueling Dragons at Islands of Adventure, the coaster just lost all its magic once it stopped dueling.
I myself was lucky enough to ride Gwazi for its last few years of operation. Many BGT fans, including myself, saw Gwazi as an eyesore to the park because the structure didn't look capable of exerting the forces of the trains on the track. When riding Gwazi, the one word to describe it is rough. As a 11-year-old kid who only liked riding Cheetah Hunt, Gwazi was my type of ride. When the train ran throughout its course, it felt like the train would fall off the track at some point for how rough the ride was. The hills would give you some decent ejector, but I couldn't enjoy the ride as I found my body shaking the entire time. I do wish they could have kept Gwazi alive, as it was one unique coaster to the park's lineup of steel coasters, but with the unbearable Florida weather, I could see why the closure of Gwazi was necessary.
In 2015, the coaster was reaching its breaking point, so Busch Gardens Tampa announced that on February 1st, 2015, Gwazi would unfortunately close for good. However, instead of demolishing the coaster, it would be put in standing but not operating mode for 4 years. The coaster was in horrible shape by the time it closed. In 2017, when Hurricane Irma struck Florida, the structure would be deemed unsafe, And finally, in 2019, we would see some progress in what all enthusiasts have wanted to see since Gwazi announced its closure back in 2015. Finally, in 2019, Gwazi would be torn down for RMC's latest hybrid conversion.
What's that?
The wait is over. Something's coming. You've been waiting.
All waiting. The wait is over.
Wait is over.
Wait is over.
Rocky Mountain Construction would take their best shot on rebuilding Gwazi with their iBox track, but since Gwazi was in horrible shape, Rocky Mountain Construction would only use 10% of the old support structure, and if I'm correct, that is the least amount of structure they have used on their hybrid conversions, which means that 90% of the structure is new RMC wood. Iron Gwazi is scheduled to open very soon, since Busch Gardens Tampa recently announced its reopening date after the COVID-19 pandemic. Iron Gwazi looks like one amazing coaster after seeing its first couple test runs, and we could see a new icon at this legendary park.
Gwazi's history may seem a bit rocky, but the future for this coaster looks bright, as Iron Gwazi will easily be one unforgettable attraction that this park really needed.
In the end, Gwazi's legacy lives on in steel form, and we can thank GCI's amazing creation for that. While Iron Gwazi will be one of the best coasters in the world, who can forget the legendary dueling coaster that formerly stood in its place? Thank you guys for watching my latest edition of The Story Behind. If you enjoyed this series, click on my playlist with all the other episodes of The Story Behind and stay tuned for more editions. Big thanks to Itai from ItaiKoasterFanatic for collabing with me on this video. You can go check out his content by clicking the link in the description. Make sure to comment down below what coaster or attraction you want to learn the story behind for, and maybe it might just be the next episode. This was Hunter from Theme Park Hunting. I'll see you guys later, and as always, follow the thrill.